guys, my name is Simon from the Loki project. I'm joined by Key, tech lead.
Hey guys.
Today we wanted to do a little video just sort of explaining what the hell's going on inside the project. Some of you may have noticed that lately there have been some moving estimates around timelines for different things that are happening in the project, and we just wanted to talk about the current status with various parts of the project, why things have been moving around, what some of the thinking behind that moving around is, and what some of the persistent problems are that we are having to address. So I think the big thing that many of you noticed was that we shifted around the roadmap recently in the last couple of months, and already it's starting to look like that roadmap won't be met in time. There's a number of reasons for that, but the big one is LokiNet.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not necessarily that some parts of the roadmap aren't going to be met, because there's a lot of stuff in the current roadmap that will be met.
Yeah.
It's mainly that some of our priorities are changing as well. Like some stuff is being brought forward from Q3 to Q2, some stuff even from Q4 as well. So it's not just that we are failing to meet some of our goals, which is the case because of some of the things that we are doing. It's also that our priorities are changing as well.
So I think the big thing to understand here is that most things in the project are moving ahead a lot faster than we expected they would be, particularly with the messenger. We're very happy to tell you all today that we are already done with feature parity between the desktop Loki Messenger and the iOS Loki Messenger. And that has happened in a matter of weeks, which has been a really exciting development. And Android should be fairly fast as well, another few weeks, and that'll also have feature parity. The only issue is that is all not very useful if sort of the main anonymity feature that makes that all glue together is not in a good state. And unfortunately, LokiNet for the last several months has been in a persistent state of breaking, working great, breaking, working great, back and forth between this, and it's been a real mission to really understand what the issues are, how to address them, experimenting with things to make it more stable. We're kind of in a state now where LokiNet is running on just a single machine and it's sort of being simulated between itself. It runs amazingly fast, it's amazingly stable, there's no issues whatsoever. Yeah. But as soon as we introduce any sort of real world latency, we start to really run into some issues. So in the last couple of weeks, we launched this thing that we've internally been calling ConsensusNet, because that's when we wanted to have it done by, the consensus, which was last week, but anyway. This thing is a cluster on AWS that we're able to grow and shrink very quickly, and we're able to upload new versions of LokiNet and update the node network at the drop of a hat, and it's regulated by service nodes on a new testnet. It's got the storage server as well, so we can do messages. It's geographically diverse, so we've got various servers in the US and various servers in Singapore and some other places as well. So there's real latency, there's real packets being sent between different parts of the world, and we can kind of take a big bird's eye view at it all and look at it. And what we've discovered is that there's some real issues whenever that real world latency is introduced, whether it's got something to do with packet loss or latency or a number of other issues is up for debate. And that's something that we're working through at the moment within the team. The biggest issue with LokiNet at the moment is that because it is so new, we've been trying really, really hard to just get it to work. We haven't actually done a lot of the work that's required to be able to diagnose things when things go wrong. Yeah. So at the moment, the only time we know when stuff isn't working is when we get an error message, and all it will tell us is that something is timed out. And it won't tell us why it's timed out or what specifically is going wrong. So we now need to take a step back with LokiNet, really develop all of these monitoring tools, and so we can really start to drill down into the issues beneath it and work out what we need to do to get it fixed. And unfortunately, without us being able to understand what the problems actually are, it's very hard for us to be able to put estimates on how long it's going to take to get into a stable state. So that's kind of why the timelines around Loki Messenger and LokiNet and all of the launches around that, they're all tied to they have to this point all been tied to the stability of LokiNet, which in the last 3 or 4 months, despite the many, many features that have been added and many, many fixes that have been put in place to LokiNet, is still not in a very good state. So there's a bit more work to be done in that regard.
Yeah.
However, we have been discussing in the last few days about an alternative release schedule, which would still put us ahead in terms of the messenger. Because the progress has been so fast, we've been discussing the possibility of launching a LokiNet-less version of the Loki Messenger.
Yeah.
So all of the swarms will work, all of the offline and online message routing will work. It'll be the world's first version of BitMessage that does asynchronous and synchronous messaging. It'll still be a very interesting product. It just won't have many of the privacy features that the end product will have towards the end of the year once we start to manage to glue everything back together. But that's something we can actually put out fairly quickly. So we're very pleased to announce today that, well, we're announcing an announcement because we need to do a little bit more work to understand exactly what is going to be required to build this.
Yeah.
We're going to have to do a little bit of work inside Loki D.
Well, the main problem being right now, the communication that we do between service nodes is actually happening through LokiNet right now. So we actually need to pull some of that out and put that inside of Loki D itself. So what we're going to be doing is building kind of a distributed hashing table inside of Loki D so the service nodes can communicate with each other. And that's the main component that we need to build. We think that we can probably piggyback off some of the stuff that's happening in uptime proofs already to do that. So we don't think it's going to take too long. But yeah, there is a significant amount of work that needs to be done to make Loki Messenger work without LokiNet itself. So that's the main front we're working on.
So we're going to do a bit of research over the next week or so and figure out exactly what the approach is going to be there and then how long that might take. And then in the coming week or two, I would say we'd have a pretty good idea of when that might happen. We'll do another announcement explaining in full detail how this new system will work and give you some timelines on when that might happen. And the nice thing about it is that we can launch this sooner rather than later with the desktop and iOS versions already working, and then whenever Android is done, it just switches on, connects to the network, no further updates required. So we can start to compile all this stuff, do lots of user experience testing, get you guys using the messenger, giving us some feedback on what you'd like to see within it, whatever changes or things from other apps that you'd like to include in it, that sort of thing. At the same time, we'll be working on Loki Name Service and Blink as well, which are really exciting developments happening on the mainnet side of things. Checkpointing is also going ahead really nicely, and that's something that will also come out in this next hard fork that the Messenger will probably come out on as well.
So, well, I think we'll be running through a list the questions of like every single thing. So
kind of been going a little bit off piece, so we'll get back onto the thing. So we put together some questions that we think you might have about this whole scenario. The first one is, how do we set deadlines for Loki projects? Now, this is a really interesting question because when we started the project, it looks a lot different to how it does today. We were a lot smaller. The scope of the project was not as clear as it is now. In fact, it's probably smaller than it is now. We've definitely expanded
the scope
of things since we started, and even in the last 6 months, there's a lot of new stuff coming up all the time. Like checkpointing, for example, is a pretty big feature that doesn't exist in the original white paper. So, setting deadlines is one of those things where you have this issue of known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. And what that means is we can only really make accurate assessments about how long things are going to take when we know what we have to do exactly, and we can figure out how long they're going to take with a reasonable accuracy. Then there are things that we know that we don't know. So for example, we know roughly how long it is going to take to put more diagnostic tools into LokiNet. That's something that we can predict. But the known unknown, we know that we don't know what that is going to reveal. We don't know what the problems are, so we have no idea how long they're going to take to fix after we figure out what the problems are. And then there are unknown unknowns. And so that's kind of the space that LokiNet's been operating in for the last 5 months. We don't know what is broken, and we don't know how to know what is broken. So that's what we're trying to fix now.
Another really good point is, and I can give you a really example of this, the main developer who's working on service node checkpointing right now is Doyle. and he has all of the domain knowledge around checkpointing right now, because it is a relatively large task, but it's a task that should go to one person and one person should work on it. There should be some review around it, but mainly we're leaving that to him. But the thing that I want to talk about specifically is, as Doyle works on this task, he encounters other issues. So, for example, there was a bug in Monero that we needed to fix, and that takes him off checkpointing to fix something in Monero that needs to go back into Loki. So there's all of these things that come up with specific developers in the team where they need to go work on another project. That takes them out of their project that they're currently working on, and then there's some space when they need to sync back to it. So we can't exactly, like when we plan checkpointing, we're not thinking, oh, there's going to be a critical bug in Loki that we're going to need to fix that will take Doyle 10 days time. Like, to a certain extent, there's things that we can't plan for in terms of like just the natural development of Loki, and those things are also causing delays as well. So that's another thing to consider when we're setting deadlines.
And then there's more day-to-day sort of things. The community may be aware of a couple of times where we've had to extend hard fork timelines and that sort of thing, just because 3 weeks out things are looking great, and then something happens, whether or not it's got anything to do with the update whatsoever, and it just throws off the development timeline. And how safe we feel about putting something out there onto the mainnet. And so we've had to make some last minute calls to push back deadlines and that sort of thing to make sure that we can actually get things out in a secure manner, and often that has not been enough. Like, we haven't been conservative enough in our timelines, and we know that the community wants to hear that things are happening now, and the hard fork is happening next week, and we're getting this new feature, and we're getting this new product. But that can lead to some catastrophic scenarios, some of which we saw recently with the staking requirement divergence because of an error that was a bug that was missed in the original release, and we had that scenario where operators had something like 6 hours to upgrade all their nodes, otherwise they'd get deregistered, or we thought they would anyway. Scenarios like that can be avoided if we are able to have more time to do things. But we also want things to get out there, because we don't have unlimited time. We know you guys don't have unlimited patience either. So there is this balance to be struck between releasing products that are well designed, bug free, does what it says on the box, get them out there on time and quickly, versus really trying to push and tick all the boxes as quickly as we can, just to say that we've done it. And I don't think that's a very generous thing to do.
Well, that's the other thing. Like, Loki is also not a central company. Like, our software is not run by Loki itself. It's run by like 500 different service node operators in different jurisdictions in different time zones and have different availability. So it's not like we can just release a patch and it just goes live across the whole network immediately. There's also this massive time lag where we need to add, we typically add 4 weeks before every single release as well. So you've got to add that to the release time as well. Like, there are a lot of things that, if we were a centralized company that could just push out software updates, would make it a lot faster. But that's another consideration to add to our timelines on everything.
To get back to the core of the question, how we set deadlines at Loki, we gather the best information that we can from what we can see, what our developers can see, and what the community can see, and try and use that to piece together the most accurate timeline based on what people are working on, what the disruptions might be, how long they think they need, how long we think they might need, and some balance of that in between. And sometimes, especially where unknown unknowns are involved, as there has been in LokiNet for some time now, the timelines can just be drastically different to what we thought they'd be. On the messenger side, they've been so much faster than any of us could have ever imagined. And on the LokiNet side, we just haven't had a clue, and we still don't really. So that's just the way things are, unfortunately.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be slow as well. Like, we could wake up tomorrow and Jeff finds like the miracle bug and it just fixes everything, right?
I think that's unlikely.
Probably unlikely, but there is that degree of like, it's so, like, there's some amount of uncertainty there, and that creates situations where it could go either way. But yeah, the other thing is like we tend to try and add buffers as well. So when we set a release time, we've typically added some time onto the end of that for unknown unknowns. It just seems that the times that we've been adding so far haven't been enough.
No.
We've been running into too many of those unknown unknowns.
Can you go through the things currently on the roadmap for Q2 and give us an update on how everything is going? Yes. First of all, we have the Service Node bundle. The Service Node bundle is, I'm assuming this is talking about the launcher.
Yeah, it's probably talking about the launcher. Maybe the Debian builds as well. Like, this is pretty much done. Like, the Loki Launcher is up on GitHub. You can try it out right now. Basically, the idea being that the Loki Launcher should have LokiNet, the Loki storage server, Loki D, and am I missing one more thing?
No, that's it.
No, that's it. So those three things, and then the Loki Launcher should be basically like a watcher that watches all of these services and manages them independently. So a service node operator only needs to run Loki Launcher, and all of the other services are managed by Loki Launcher itself.
So you'll be able to do all your configuration and setup through that one binary, so things are far less complicated. And it'll keep those binaries running and alive, and if they die, it'll try to launch them again.
Yeah.
That's all done. That's how we've been able to get consensus net going. So, yeah. Loki onion key rotation.
Not done yet. Jeff wants to do it, but we've been focusing on stability at the moment in LokiNet, so that will probably come in Q3, depending on how fast LokiNet gets stable.
I imagine the same goes for LokiNet RC expiration.
Correct, yeah.
All of the LokiNet stuff is great, but only if LokiNet works reliably, which it currently doesn't. So, payment ID depreciation.
Yeah, that's done. We're following Monero's ideas at the moment around payment ID depreciation, so you can keep up to date on the GitHub on that one.
The next one is service node checkpointing. We've touched on this a little bit already. We set a deadline for it in July, I believe.
Yeah, so I don't know how public this should be, but we're planning a release for July for Loki D or Loki Core, which should include checkpointing.
And then we also have the service node testing suite. Work's already begun on the service node testing suite. Some of the tests are already complete. What this is talking about is the tools in the software that will allow service nodes to check that the other service nodes are doing their job.
Yeah.
Instead of just simply doing an uptime proof, they'll actually have to prove that they're storing the blockchain, prove that they're routing messages, prove that they're routing traffic, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
We are fairly far down the track with this on some of the tests already.
Well, message storage is done.
Yeah.
Blockchain storage is now in a pull request. The last tests are exit node tests, which is kind of an open problem at the moment, but exit nodes aren't enabled, so we don't really need that right away. And then the other tests are client-side tests. So when you create a service node for the first time, there should be some amount of testing for you, the operator, to be able to run to understand whether you are likely to meet the limits as well.
So it's kind of like a benchmarking tool that'll let
yeah.
you check to see if you've got enough power, enough memory, enough storage, enough bandwidth to be able to run a service node reliably.
Yeah.
So it'll let you know that before you lock up all of your funds for 30 days, that your computer might not be up to scratch.
Yeah.
And in that case, that might save some of our users a bit of strife, so hopefully that's useful.
The other test is the bandwidth storage test, which is coming along. Like I think we've just started it, and I've also started collecting statistics from the service node operators, so we know what kind of boundaries to set for this kind of stuff. So that's happening. It's starting to happen.
Max has been the one that's been working on all these tests, and that's going fairly well. But because of the new idea about running this sort of scaled back version of Loki Messenger, it's likely that we'll put some of these tests on hold if they won't be coming out this release. So that's a thing. The last one we have, we have two more. Loki Messenger, the desktop version, it works. We're now making some user experience improvements to it and working through some iterations there. But regardless of what state we land in there, this will come out with the rest of the Loki Messenger bundle, probably at the next hard fork, as we have been discussing throughout this video. iOS, Loki Messenger is looking really good. The Loki Ios Wallet is the next thing that we have here. This has been done for like a month now.
Yeah.
and I want to do very bad things to Apple because they are driving us up the wall. The iOS wallet works, and we are waiting to release it, and it is entirely dependent on Apple as to when that comes out. Yet another known unknown. So we don't know when Apple is going to give us the thumbs up on the App Store, but when it does, we will let you know. And then the LokiNet new wire protocol, that is something that we had on the roadmap, but once again, because of the persistent reliability issues, that will be put on hold until we understand what the issues are. It may actually be related to the wire protocol, in which case we will update the wire protocol to resolve it. But
and there's the design documentations for the new wire protocol are actually on GitHub right now, so if you're interested in that, you can go and read it. It just hasn't been implemented in LokiNet yet.
They've got another question here. Can you go through the things currently on the roadmap for Q3 and give us an update on how everything is going there? Yes, we can. The LokiNet mobile clients. These are being, there's a pull request in at the moment for iOS for the wrapper there, so that can start working. Once again, reliability issues come first, because if LokiNet is not reliable, there's not really a point porting it over to iOS. There has been a wrapper for Android for months now, so that just needs a little bit of work, and we can get that working. So the LokiNet mobile clients will follow shortly on after the reliability issues have been solved, and the Messenger team is done porting Loki Messenger onto Android as well. So once those two things are complete, the LokiNet mobile clients will be the next thing to happen. The in-browser Loki Wallet, not started. The browser issue is, once again, without the reliability of LokiNet, there's kind of very little point. So that hasn't been started yet. Hardware wallet integration. This is one of those things that is just sort of just sitting off to the side, and it's something we can do, and we're sort of waiting for a time at which the core developers are...
Well, the thing is, like, all of the code that's necessary, we have merged upstream. So, like, for example, like, there's a lot of forks of Monero out there that are really quite old, like using old versions of Monero, or like they're thousands of commits behind. We're actually nearly up to date with Monero right now, so we just put in a pull request to get, I think, maybe 50 commits behind, which means all of the hardware wallet stuff that's necessary for Loki is in. It just needs some work to be modified to fit Loki's purpose and test as well to make sure that there's no bugs. So it's just really waiting for a core developer to come along that has some extra time to do that kind of stuff.
But finding a core developer with a couple of weeks of extra time is... it's very hard.
So we have kind of 3 or 2.5 core developers. Jason, well, he doesn't work at RangePro, he works for the Loki Foundation, but he's working on Blink. Doyle is currently working on service node checkpointing, and Maxim, who's kind of a core developer, kind of a storage server developer, we just reassigned him to make the non-LokiNet messenger as well.
So it will happen at some point, but it's just one of those resourcing questions. It's when does a developer become available where we don't have anything better for them to do at that time? A hardware wallet integration is one of those things that is really great from a user perspective for coin holders, but is also one of those non-critical things that for the core of what Loki is offering above and beyond other projects, which is the Messenger, which is LokiNet, which is all that stuff, it's not a part of that at all. It's something off to the side. So it will happen. Anyway, next one, Loki Messenger iOS, Loki Messenger Android. These will happen in Q2, which is exciting.
So that's what I'm talking about, where like some of the stuff that's in Q3 has happened faster than we expected, so it's going to move to Q2. So it's not all bad news, like it's just that some of it is rearranging, like, and moving.
So there's a question here, how can the community help with delivery of projects? This is a really good question. Obviously, we're always looking for open source contributors to the project, and that is a very clear way to help with...
If you're a developer and you want to come and work for Loki, or even just contribute in an open source way, like, we try and do as much stuff on GitHub as possible, and in our public Discord channels as well. So like, just come and follow, and you should be able to find a way to help if you're a developer. If you're a non-technical person, like we always need help with translation. We always need help with people jumping on to the projects that we're working on and just testing. We try and provide enough documentation that anyone should be able to run the software. It's just that we need more users sometimes to run the software to find some of the bugs that are in, for example, our testnet releases. So if we release something on testnet a month beforehand, right now we might only have like 5 or 10 active users. The more users we have on testnet, the more period we have to find bugs, and like the quicker we can fix them. So yeah, it's basically just being involved in the community. If you're a developer, do pull requests. If you're just a normal user, run the software that we released earlier and tell us if you find any bugs.
And also there's going to be situations coming up where we're actively soliciting some help and feedback from the community, especially regarding user experience with the messenger coming up fairly soon. So keep your eyes open for that. There's always stuff to do. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to find, what's the best thing I can be testing right now. If you ever just get bored one day and want to help, give us a hand finding out what some of the issues are, just jump in the Discord, and we're more than happy to let you know what the best thing you can be spending your time on is. The situation is constantly changing, so come chat to us. We'd love to get you on the right track.
Yeah.
What kind of accountabilities does the Loki project have to deliver on its time goals, and how can the community be involved in the accountability process? This is, from a legal perspective, the Loki Foundation is constantly monitoring what the operational company Rangeproof is doing and how quickly it is doing it and in what manner. And if there are any other companies that are working on Loki at that particular time, the same accountability processes apply. The board of directors is always monitoring whether things are being done in the correct manner. But I would say that the large majority of accountability for Loki comes from our community.
Yeah.
So really, the thing that allows us to know when we are not meeting expectations is when people tell us in the community channels, where we're constantly monitoring for various comments and situations about stuff we're working on, stuff that we have said that we would do, stuff that we haven't said that we would do, and that's been really useful to inform us about what we're doing right, what we can do better, and what we haven't thought about before. So
that's the thing. Like, it's often that the directors of the foundation are bringing us community concerns. So Rangeproof, which is the company that everyone at Loki Core works for, also is monitoring the Telegram and channels and the Discord channels and all of that every day. But the ones that bring pressure to us are the Loki Foundation themselves, who bring comments from the community and say, "Hey, what are you doing about this?" And then we respond to them in kind. So it's really not one company running the show. There's various checks and balances to how Rangeproof or the Loki Foundation works. So it's always good to get involved, like get in the Discord channels, get in the Telegram community channels. Like, even though we like hearing constructive negative feedback, we like hearing any feedback really, because it tells us when we're on track, and it tells us when we're moving off that track, and we can recenter from that community feedback as well, even if it's negative.
And I think there's been plenty of situations where we have thought differently and the foundation has agreed with us about approaches that the community hasn't liked, or there's been dissenting opinions on, and sometimes things go the way that we decide and not how, because we kind of think that we have a better idea of what the bigger picture might be and all of that sort of thing. So, we're not entirely influenced by what the community thinks. I think that would be fairly naive to just listen to whatever the crowd is saying at any given time. But yeah, Key's right. The vast majority of input we get and feedback we get from you guys is basically what keeps us going and keeps us on track. And so it's very, very important that it continues. And we are always trying to encourage more discussion. We're always trying to encourage more feedback. But at the same time, there are certain decisions that we may have other ideas on. And depending on what the foundation says about it, will sort of guide where things go.
Yeah. And also, if you want to be a member of the foundation, you can apply to be a member of the foundation as well. It's not just this insular group of people who are like just deciding all of the things, right? Like it's a group that you can actually join as well if you have the right qualifications, if you're motivated, if you have a particular insight into the Loki community as well. A really good example is Jason. He came up from the community in our Telegram chat, and now he's a member of the foundation. So there's always the possibility for you to actually have a word in the direction of Loki outside of just the community, which we take into account as well. There's also opportunity to be on the foundation too.
There's one final question, which is, how can we have a better process for projects that do get delayed? I think we're always trying to fight to get the best outcome we can as far as time and product delivery and product quality goes. So we're always learning from past mistakes, and we're learning as we go in a lot of circumstances. But I think what we can do potentially better, and I think we're trying to do this now through this video, is be more transparent about the happenings within the community, within the project, and within the product development timeframe. Yeah. And as a part of that, we're also going to be launching something that we're calling community roundtables, which will be a open meeting between some of the main people at the Loki project from all of the different teams, where any community member can come in and speak to us. You know, we really want to show that we're not just some anonymous team that sort of works in some basement somewhere and doesn't want to reveal a lot about what is happening behind the scenes. I mean, to a certain extent, we do need to be careful about what we say and what we promise, because it sets expectations that may not, come to fruition. So there are certain things that we won't be able to talk about, like proposed deadline, like specific proposed deadlines that are likely to move and that sort of thing, because we don't want to mislead anyone because we gain new information later on down the track that forces us to change our mind about something. But at the same time, there is definitely a lot more that we can do to fold the rest of the community into the day-to-day happenings here at Loki. So that's something that we'll be doing very soon.
The other thing that I want to talk about with our transparency is also, I don't want to change the roadmap anymore without there being a notification to the community as well. Because before we have actually changed the roadmap sometimes without telling everyone in the community, just because we wanted to update things that weren't currently happening on time. So I think like the next time we want to update the roadmap, we should actually tell the community about that as well, just so they're on top of things.
And we will be updating the roadmap now in conjunction with the release of this video, because obviously, as we've discussed, a lot of this is already done, moved around, moved forward, moved back, number of things. So we'll be changing the roadmap again very shortly. If you have any questions for us about anything that has come up in this video, or you just want to chat, or you want to help us test stuff out, the best place to find us is in the Discord. Otherwise, we're also on Telegram, Reddit, so forth. But I think the main takeaway is if you've enjoyed this discussion and you're interested in some of the day-to-day happenings at Loki and you want to get a little bit more involved, please do come to our community roundtables. I understand some people around the world may struggle with the time zones, particularly in Europe. The time that we've selected isn't amazing. But you can also submit questions ahead of time. We'll be submitting recordings of all of the meetings as well. So no matter where you are in the world, you should be able to find a way to participate. And we'd love to see you there, so do come by. Anyway, I think that'll do for today. So thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned.
See ya.